For months, I'd suspected my husband was having an affair. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the sudden business trips that never quite added up. I could have confronted him with tears and accusations. I could have made a scene. Instead, I did something far more effective. I documented everything, waited for the perfect moment, and sent one carefully chosen photograph to exactly the right person. What happened next wasn't violence or drama. It was simply the truth, delivered strategically, changing everything. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't loud, it's precise. If this story helps you understand that truth is the most powerful weapon, please like and subscribe. There are moments when you realize that emotional confrontation will accomplish nothing, when you understand that tears and accusations will just give the person who's betraying you opportunity to deny or minimize or manipulate, when you recognize that the most powerful response to betrayal isn't dramatic scene, but rather strategic revelation of truth to people who have the power to impose real consequences. For 6 months, I'd known my husband Derek was having an affair with a woman from his office, had been gathering evidence while maintaining appearance of oblivious wife who suspected nothing, had been waiting for exactly the right moment to reveal what I knew in a way that would have maximum impact and minimum opportunity for him to control the narrative or minimize the damage. The moment came when Derek announced he was going on weekend business trip that I knew was actually romantic getaway with his mistress. When he made the mistake of lying to me about his whereabouts while I had photographic evidence of exactly where he actually was and who he was with. What I did with that evidence, one carefully chosen photograph sent to one specific person at exactly the right time, ended Derek's affair, damaged his professional reputation, and ensured that his betrayal had consequences he'd never anticipated. My name is Victoria Hayes, and I'm 34 years old. I'd been married to Derek for 7 years when I discovered his affair, 7 years during which I'd believed we had solid, if not passionate marriage, comfortable partnership that was built on mutual respect and shared life goals, even if it wasn't particularly romantic or exciting. Derek was 36, worked as account manager at mid-sized marketing firm, made good salary that combined with my income as graphic designer provided comfortable middle-class lifestyle. The affair had started about 8 months before I discovered it, though I wouldn't learn the timeline until I'd done extensive investigation into Derek's activities and his relationship with the woman he was involved with. Her name was Jessica Romano. She was 28, worked as junior account coordinator at Derek's firm, was attractive and ambitious, and apparently willing to have relationship with married man, if that man was her supervisor, and could potentially advance her career. The first signs that something was wrong had been subtle. Derek coming home later than usual several nights a week, being more protective of his phone than he'd previously been, showing less interest in physical intimacy with me while seeming generally happier and more energetic in ways that suggested he was getting emotional and physical fulfillment from somewhere outside our marriage. I'd initially attributed these changes to work stress or to natural evolution of long-term relationship, had told myself that 7-year marriages often went through periods of reduced intimacy, and that Derek's late nights were probably just career advancement efforts. But the changes had intensified over several months in ways that made innocent explanations increasingly implausible. Derek had started taking weekend business trips to visit clients or attend conferences, trips that seemed more frequent than his job had previously required, and that he was oddly vague about when I'd ask for details. He'd become defensive when I'd ask casual questions about his day or his work, would accuse me of being controlling or distrustful when I'd show any interest in his activities beyond surface-level pleasantries. The discovery that confirmed my growing suspicions came when Derek had left his laptop open and logged into his personal email account while he'd gone to answer a phone call. I'd glanced at the screen and had seen email from Jessica Romano with subject line that was clearly personal rather than professional, had made split-second decision to quickly scan the content before Derek returned. What I'd seen had confirmed that Derek and Jessica were having an affair. The email had been arranging their next meeting, had referenced previous sexual encounters, had included expressions of affection and desire that were unmistakably romantic rather than professional. The confirmation of the affair had been devastating, but had also created clarity about what I needed to do next. I could have confronted Derek immediately, could have demanded explanations and apologies and promises to end the affair. But I'd recognized that direct confrontation would just give him opportunity to minimize what was happening, to make promises he might or might not keep, to potentially turn the situation around and make me feel like I was overreacting or being unreasonable. Instead, I'd decided to document the affair thoroughly while maintaining appearance of being unaware, to gather evidence that would give me power and options when I eventually decided to act on what I knew. Over the following 3 months, I'd become skilled at monitoring Derek's activities without his knowledge. I'd installed tracking software on his phone that allowed me to see his location and his messages, had gained access to his email accounts and his text messages, had documented patterns of when and where he was meeting Jessica and what they were doing together. I'd taken photographs of them together when I'd followed him on occasions when he'd claimed to be working late or meeting clients, had compiled comprehensive record of their affair that would be impossible for Derek to deny or minimize if I chose to reveal it. What I'd discovered through this investigation was an affair that was more serious and more brazen than I'd initially suspected. Derek and Jessica weren't just having occasional sexual encounters. They were in full relationship, were spending multiple nights per week together, were taking romantic weekend trips that Derek was lying to me about, were apparently discussing future together that would require Derek leaving his marriage. Jessica was posting photos on her private social media accounts that showed her and Derek together in romantic settings, was referring to him as her boyfriend to her friends, was apparently operating under assumption that Derek was in process of leaving me and that their relationship would eventually become public. The evidence I'd gathered had given me multiple options for how to respond to Derek's betrayal. I could use it in divorce proceedings to demonstrate his infidelity and potentially get more favorable settlement. I could confront him privately and demand he end the affair and work on our marriage. I could expose the affair publicly to friends and family in ways that would humiliate him and damage his reputation. Each option had different benefits and different costs, and I'd spent considerable time thinking through what outcome I actually wanted and what approach would be most likely to achieve it. What I'd ultimately decided was that I wanted Derek to face consequences for his affair that went beyond just our personal relationship. Wanted him to understand that betraying his marriage while conducting an affair with subordinate at his workplace was behavior that would have professional ramifications in addition to personal ones. The affair between supervisor and subordinate was violation of his company's ethics policies, was potential liability for the firm if it created appearance of favoritism or inappropriate use of authority, was something his employer would need to know about and address regardless of what happened with our marriage. The opportunity to reveal the affair in most impactful way came when Derek announced he was going on weekend business trip to attend client meeting in nearby city. I'd known from monitoring his communications that the trip was actually romantic getaway with Jessica, that they'd booked hotel room together and were planning weekend away from their respective lives and responsibilities. Derek had been confident in his lie, had apparently not considered that I might verify his story or might have any way of knowing where he actually was and what he was actually doing. I'd followed them to the hotel where they'd checked in together on Friday evening, had documented their arrival with photographs that clearly showed them as couple rather than as colleagues on business trip. And then I'd waited until Saturday afternoon, when Derek had told me he'd be an important client meeting that would last most of the day, to send one carefully selected photograph to one specific person who had power to impose consequences that would matter to Derek professionally and financially. The photograph I'd chosen showed Derek and Jessica entering the hotel together with overnight bags, clearly dressed for romantic weekend, rather than for business meeting, body language and facial expressions, making obvious they were couple rather than colleagues. The person I'd sent it to was Derek's direct supervisor at his firm, the senior vice president who managed Derek's department and who would be responsible for addressing ethics violations and inappropriate relationships between supervisors and subordinates. I'd included brief message with the photograph. I thought you should know that Derek Hayes and Jessica Romano are having an affair and have been for at least 6 months. This photograph was taken yesterday when Derek told me he was attending client meeting, but was actually on romantic weekend with his subordinate Jessica. I believe this violates your company's ethics policies regarding relationships between supervisors and employees they supervise. I've documented their relationship extensively and have additional evidence available if needed for your investigation. The response had been swift and comprehensive. Derek's supervisor had called him immediately, had demanded he return to office for emergency meeting, had initiated investigation into the relationship and into whether Derek had shown favoritism to Jessica or had created inappropriate work environment through his conduct. Derek had tried to deny the relationship initially, but the evidence I'd provided combined with investigation of his and Jessica's work communications and their behaviors at office had made denial impossible. The professional consequences for Derek had been severe. He'd been terminated for ethics violations after investigation, confirmed he'd been in relationship with subordinate he supervised, and that he'd shown favoritism toward her in work assignments and performance evaluations. Jessica had also been terminated for participating in relationship that violated ethics policies and for making false statements during investigation when she'd initially denied involvement with Derek. Both of them had lost their jobs, and their professional reputations had been damaged in ways that would affect their future employment prospects in their industry. The personal consequences had been equally significant. Derek's termination had meant loss of his income and his health insurance, had created immediate financial crisis that had forced him to confront reality of what his affair had cost him professionally and financially. The exposure of the affair had also destroyed whatever relationship he'd had with Jessica. Once the romantic weekend had been interrupted by professional crisis, and once both of them had lost their jobs as a result of their relationship, their affair had collapsed under weight of real-world consequences they'd apparently never anticipated while conducting it in secret. Derek had tried various approaches to salvage our marriage after the professional and personal devastation his affair had caused. Apologies, promises to end relationship with Jessica completely, claims that he'd made terrible mistake and wanted chance to rebuild my trust. But I'd been unmoved by his attempts at reconciliation. He'd had affair for at least 6 months, had lied to me repeatedly, had been planning future with Jessica while still married to me, had only ended the relationship because it had been exposed and had cost him his job. I'd filed for divorce and had used all the evidence I'd gathered to ensure settlement that was favorable to me given his infidelity and given financial crisis his termination had created. 3 years after sending that one photograph to Derek's supervisor, after divorcing him and rebuilding my life independently, I'm 37 and living with clear understanding of how powerful strategic revelation of truth can be when dealing with betrayal. Derek had believed he could conduct affair indefinitely while maintaining his career and his marriage, had thought his lies were sufficient to prevent discovery or consequences, had underestimated my awareness and my willingness to use what I knew strategically rather than just emotionally. The single photograph I'd sent, one carefully chosen image delivered to exactly the right person at exactly the right time, had accomplished more than any amount of tears or confrontations or emotional appeals could have achieved. It had ended the affair definitively, had imposed professional consequences that Derek would carry for years, had ensured that his betrayal cost him far more than just his marriage. What I learned from Derek's affair, and from my strategic response to it, is that truth delivered precisely is more powerful than emotional reaction. That documentation and timing and choosing your moments carefully can accomplish outcomes that drama and confrontation never could. That sometimes the best revenge isn't loud or violent or dramatic, but is simply ensuring that someone faces appropriate consequences for their choices and their betrayals. My name is Victoria Hayes. My husband had an affair with coworker for months while lying to me about business trips and late nights at office. Instead of confronting him emotionally, I documented everything, waited for perfect moment, and sent one photograph to his supervisor showing him on romantic weekend with subordinate he'd claimed was just colleague. That single image, delivered strategically to person with power to impose real consequences, ended the affair, cost Derek his job, destroyed his relationship with his mistress, and ensured his betrayal had price he'd never anticipated paying. Sometimes most powerful response to betrayal isn't tears or violence, it's truth, delivered precisely to people who can make it matter. Thank you for reading. If this story helps you understand that truth is the most powerful weapon, please like and subscribe.